Hey, welcome to Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. It is Friday Night Live.
Yes, and guess what we're here to do? We're here to help you get high, to bring you hope, inspiration for growth and healing.
You know, we often talk about the things that people don't want to talk about. However, they're important subjects and they need to be talked about to decrease and get rid of the stigma for healing.
Absolutely. And tonight's show is a celebration of community coming together to collaborate, to elevate the plant, to decrease stigma so we can share the good news about plant medicine. Yeah. We're excited to be a part of the first all cannabis-based radio show, In the Weeds, Prohibition Talk Radio. When missions and visions align, magic is created. So, Nurse Mark, will you please introduce our guest of honor?
Oh, I have the honor to introduce to you tonight, folks, Joseph Smith. He's a chef, a DJ, promoter, brand builder, radio producer, and a longtime cannabis activist dating back to when he joined NORML in 2004. In July 2018, when recreational cannabis became legal, he launched In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR 91.1 FM and WGDH 91.7 FM. Tonight, we're going to learn about the backstory of what compelled Joe to start this inclusive cannabis radio show.
All right. Listen, Joe, welcome to the show. We're so excited to be collaborating with you on both of our media platforms to bring that high vibe that so many people need these days. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and for inviting us to be part of your platform. This is so exciting.
Oh, my God. Let me first say it's fun being on the other side of the mic. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on. And I appreciate you guys joining forces with us and coming to our platform and helping us do the same thing. I think our visions are aligned. As much of a long-term, old-school OG stoner as I am, I guess. A lot of things have changed in the last few years. You know what I mean? We became activists. We've seen the health sides of things. So a lot of things have differentiated for me. And it's like breaking the stigma. So when we talked about like In the Weeds, you know, we've talked a lot now about like my past. So yeah, I come out of the music industry, you know, out of high school, we were DJing. And then DJing turned into like East Coast stuff, going down to Boston, moving to Boston for several years. But I was also a car guy. I grew up in a shop. So like, mechanically, you know, was building a lot of show cars my whole life, you know, so it was like a lot of different things I would do and interweave. And then I was also a chef for many years, and I won folders, and we've done a lot of cool things there. Went to NECI, was my official college, I guess you could say. It's the New England Culinary Institute, which was a fun trip. We've had a lot of great experiences there, been in a lot of magazines, and just worked at the right places at the right time. And then had just like the farm to table fundamentalities and health minded stuff even back then, because like even before like even cannabis kind of came into light for me being something of this nature, it was like food, you know what I mean? It was like eating the right foods. It was like the Asian mindsets of like healthy nutrition and how do you the best way to benefit from that, you know. And trying to infuse that with like a traditional French style idea of cooking with and make it healthy for somebody. And you know, back then we were dealing with a lot of gluten. You know, we're starting to see a lot of gluten intolerances hit our industry pretty hard. We were seeing a lot of people that were vegan or vegetarian, and like I said, I was working at Inn, so a lot of our experiences were with bike tours and like healthy minded people, you know. I'm in Vermont, so we're in ski resort land. So a lot of it, when you get into the higher echelons of the restaurants around here, it's health minded or it's a traditional style of cooking, right? Then how do you put that traditional style of cooking to appeal to everybody that's going to come? Because not everybody can eat a gluten based food or will eat a soup that has, you know, a mushroom soup that has a chicken broth in it. So how do you make it more appealing for the people and still satisfy the people that want the chicken broth in their soup and make it taste the same? So I became really, you know, I've created unique ways of, you know, roasting and bringing different flavors and combinations into things. So like you can eat a clam chowder because it has no flour, you know what I mean? It's thickened with rice or thickened with potatoes. So you think about these different things and that help establish many health benefits that when you taste it, it's still like, oh my God, how they pull it off, you know?
Yeah.
I'm glad I ate before we started this show, man.
Yeah, right.
If you said those things about half an hour ago, I would have been, that's
Right.
it. I'd have been hunting you down and saying, cook me up something, Joseph.
Well, that's what I'm thinking to myself too. You know what I mean? There is nothing more awesome than a man that cooks.
Right. Well, I mean, it's when we all talk about cannabinoids, right? And then now when we look at cannabinoids in a plant, like the next closest thing to it is things relative in our foods that we eat, right? And how do we get those cannabinoids in our system, like gingers and turmerics and these essential herbs, I'll also call them, you know. So many fun stories about all these weird things because I take that into my approach now. Like we've talked about, you know, how I feel about medical and rec and the approach to how I feel like, you know, educating yourself on a healthy level includes your diet, your mentality.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I think the mentality is the last thing. I think that's the thing that benefits from all your mindsets. You know what I mean? Like when you bring cannabis into your diet, your lifestyle, you get rid of opioids, you get off these addictive patterns or traits that we all have, right? And we take the honest look in the mirror and say, all right, these are things that have to change. And I think the last thing that benefits the most is our state of mentality. Like you guys talk about a lot too, which I love.
Every day.
Every day,
mentality, right? Our self-awareness, our self-consciousness. It's like, you know, I know a lot of us, and right now through COVID, we're struggling with depression, right? So one of our number one sales and most appreciated things right now, which I love right now, is cannabis, right? We see it breaking sales records every day.
Absolutely.
We're seeing opioid addictions go down. We're seeing alcoholism literally go down by statistics, right? Like proven stats. So it's not something that people are just saying. It's not a propaganda game, because, you know, the other hard thing about cannabis I struggle with, and even with our show, I take special precautions, is like the what ifs, the maybes, the, like, you know, because, you know, it is a plant, you know, where we've studied it for years. This is what I don't get about research, but when we push the envelope and say maybe, possibly, those are the things that I'm like, well, you know, there's propaganda, but I don't want to over propaganda it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I want, like with us, like we talk about a lot, it's like actually getting the research. But when we see kids and people right in front of your own eyes benefit and change and recover, and like I said, I've seen people get up and walk. I've seen people that are just hyperactive and literally having panic attacks calm right down. I've seen kids with seizures stop seizing. I've seen kids that are fighting cancer that have been literally given weeks to live healthy years of lives, and some of them are still today. I had a discussion of the little girl that we knew who passed because of the way our laws work. You know what I mean? A parent took a child away from a parent who was treating a child with CBD, and this was one of my, like we talked about how it changed for me. So there's two big things for me, and this was one of them. So I came out of the music industry, right? We're doing a festival. I was like, how do we involve the community? I'm a very
inclusive community guy.
Right. So it was like, I'm going to create a community event, and all the money is going to be put to good use. So it was Camp Tecumseh, it was Make-A-Wish Foundation, it was Kids with Cancer, right? And where they made an impact for me. So, like, you know, I'm a blunt smoker. I'm going to light up a blunt here in a minute, right? So I'm an old school smoker. I'm an OG. Like I said, it was a culture. I grew up outside of Boston. It was like the hip hop culture. You know what I mean? So
you're originally from Boston?
Well, just north of it, yeah. So I spent a lot of time in Boston, mainly the Lowell area. If anybody knows Hudson, Nashville, Lowell, that was basically where I grew up. So it was very interesting growing up, because, like, you know, each town has its own like style and thing. And at that point in time, if anybody remembers Lowell, it was really one of the highest crime rate areas on the East Coast. You know what I mean? It was a war zone down there for a long time, drugs and everything you could imagine. But I was in Boston all the time. It was basically about 35, 40 minutes north of Boston. You know, my family, we go to games and be in Boston a lot. So it's like, you know, I felt, you know, there. You know, I grew up in a different lifestyle where I am now in Vermont, right? So I do consider that my home area is just basically southern New Hampshire, but like the Lowell area is where it was fun. But, like, you know, not to lie, we were selling weed back then. You know what I mean? It was just the game we were in. We were doing it at school, it was crazy. So for me, I was experiencing that really young. So for at that point in time, we're selling to policemen, vice principal, teachers, not to throw anybody under the bus, but like I quickly early grew to realize that like literally everybody smokes weed. You know what I mean? Like this was my motto growing up. As a dealer, I just laughed at myself because as much as people are in the closet about their consumption, especially this is 20 years ago, right? So nobody wants to know, like nobody can know that the teacher that is buying weed for me can get weed because I'm a student, he's a teacher, he can't get caught smoking weed, he'll lose his job. Like we all know what the stigma used to be now, right? Right now, we're getting away. We're not all the way from that, but we're getting away from it, right? I mean, there's still people that are losing jobs,
and sure,
right? But like that stigma is going, right? They're like, oh, you smoke weed, let's go smoke weed after work. You know what I mean? Like we're coming around, right? But back then it was different. So like, my school teachers knew we were selling weed. Like it was a unique thing. Like lawyers, doctors, like I said, vice principals. I won't tell you where I went to school, so we don't get in trouble. But like they knew. So like, but as dealing with people on these levels, they also take care of you. So it was like it was a really good thing,
Yeah.
This is where I learned
Joe,
really young that everybody smokes weed, right? It's just a matter of who admits it, right? So like I think now in the last 5 years we see it with the people that were putting people away for weed are consumers, or they were, you know what I mean? Like it's sadly we see in a lot of industries that do this. When people are fighting, pedophiles, like usually the guy's a pedophile, right? Or we see the guys that are fighting the drugs are usually the guys that are taking, consuming, redistributing, and using, right? The drug war is fucked up a game, right? And
totally.
we can get into all that funness from all
But
sorts of things. Yes.
Yeah.
Joe, I want to know because, in 2018, all three of us have podcasts. Mark and I are doing a podcast together.
Yeah.
So in 2018, what compelled you to start your podcast? Because just think about it. You were a chef, a DJ, a promoter, a brand builder, so you've done all of these things.
Yep.
What made you decide, hey, it's 2018, I'm going to start In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio?
So 2018 is when Vermont went to legalize what they considered. It wasn't it was more like just legalizing recreational usage here. It wasn't like we had a retail market. They didn't put anything in, and it was 2018. And I was like, I got involved in NORML years ago when it was going big out west, where I saw and worked with the Western market and see that blow up, right? So they got a big jump start on us. Then we saw Mass go big, right? And then Mass legalized. And so for the last 13 years, I was actually on radio as a DJ doing like the top 40 club mixed down with live DJs. We did like the John Garabedian open house party, but it was like EDM club music, right? We'd have live DJs on. So basically, as being like the underground weed guy growing in the black market per se, I knew a lot of people in the industry. I'm talking to the best growers, the best people. And as legalization was coming, everybody had a different opinion. Everybody had a different worry. Nobody was on the same page. And I was kind of worried about an industry that was about to pop off where nobody knew what anything was supposed to be, what the laws were. So I became dedicated to educate people on, for me, what would break the stigma. Like I was saying, my mom was a nurse. So this is one of the big things we were talking about before, right? The things that drove me here was like educate my mom, because I saw a little girl who was living her life and beating cancer because of cannabis, right? So for me, like it was hard to educate or change a stigma to somebody like a nurse, right? Without somebody in a medical aspect being helped by it, because it's like, oh, mom, I feel great. I'm just high. I feel, it's like trying to tell somebody being an alcoholic is making me feel good, right? So it was trying to break the stigma. My mom's a nurse. She thinks it's the devil's lettuce. She's never smoked it. And I get it.
Does she still think that though? That's the key.
Awkwardly, we haven't sat down and had that conversation yet. Like she's the one person I really want to go to the most and hand a joint to. She's a cigarette consumer. She has a history of seizures. So for me, it's like, let's introduce you to some CBD oil. You know what I mean? She's a smoker and she smokes quite a few cigarettes a day. I'm like, let me introduce you to some THC, because I think from everything that I've experienced in my lifetime around this plant and read and consumed and talked about, and people who have actually get to shake, this is where I get sensitive because I've shaked these people's hands. I've seen it. You know what I mean? It's like everybody's like, oh yeah, there's an article. Well, I've seen this article 5 times in my experience personally, right? And I can probably share 6 more articles that I've read about these experiences that will back up that validation, right? And then that's where I go, is the research really there? Of course it is. We all forget before this plant, and before the 1930s, we'll say this plant was used as a medicine, right? In multiple aspects. You were forced,
thousands of years, thousands and
required
thousands.
you to grow it, right?
Mhm.
How is our research not really there? And then even to say that we're seeing some of these other drugs that we're looking at now as being beneficial that we've outlawed and being legalized in states, right? Some of these same drugs that we had going back then that we had either utilized by the pharmaceutical company, like a morphine. You know what I mean? When you look back at all these drugs, it's like cannabis, morphine, and you're like, that must have been a trip, right? But a lot of people don't realize even then it was only available in liquidized form. We weren't allowed flower in our country, right?
Mhm.
The hemp market, uniquely, not to get off our subject about the show, but the hemp market uniquely was actually a huge agricultural commodity in our country, but we lost traction there in our country. So there's a lot of things behind the criminalization of cannabis. I like to say criminalization because it's just, it's literally what happened from political and multiple levels, right? But for me, it was like educating people on all these aspects, right? Because I was hearing misinformation, I was hearing propaganda, I was hearing the stigmas, I was hearing the back end of the Ronald Reagan era people going, "Oh my God, your brain's an egg and you're going to fry it," right? So, and here I am going, I've been.
And he ended up dying of what? Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah, right. So I've always considered myself the productive consumer, right? Like I've always managed and run restaurants and businesses and everything I've kind of ever entered myself into in my life since I was a teenager and a consumer, whether it was even sports, right? I would smoke weed before games, and play great. So it's like I didn't understand all
The
these
medicinal.
things, like being lazy, being fat, being sloppy, being all these things. You know what I mean? And all my friends were just like me, like we were just very productive stoners, right? And then they've all gone on to be productive people, right? So for me, now we have to break the stigma. How do we do it? And I had access to radio. So that's literally where it all started. So me being a part of WGDR, WGDH, it took me a few years to pitch it because FCC airwaves, technically what we did on the radio would be considered a felony every show we did because we're basically promoting a Schedule One substance, right? So whether it's cannabis or like even with like any Schedule One substance that's on that list, if you can't have a talk show promoting it, right? And then the government's not going to allow you to do that. So we got under the umbrella of utilizing a college-based, educational, community-based platform that is non-commercial. So that's where the trick was. You know what I mean? So for us, we had to take it with an educational approach. It's the way I wanted to take it. So everybody from 4 years old to 94 years old could sit down, consume it, and get educated from it. So it wasn't meant to ever be stoner radio, right? It was never meant to mock the plant. So when I approached it, I was like, all right, so now here I am. I have this ability. I talked to the radio station. They want nothing to do with it. But I did get them to talk to the mother station who, once they heard the pitch, were like, Pacifica Radio, were like, how, get them on. When can you start? They were like, literally went from like arguing and beating that door and reminding them, did you ask him? Did you talk to him? Just give me a chance. Like, I think this will be great. And then other people around us hearing the thing and be like, this will be great. This is what we need. We're going to legalization. This is exactly what we need. To Pacifica here to being like, can they start tomorrow? And it was like, oh shit, now I got to build this thing, right? So that was my
good problem to have, man.
Right,
really good problem.
I had the time in. I had the mindset. So I brought in friends of mine. So I brought in a co-host to help me produce and to basically engineer the show. And then I brought in, for me, I really looked at. There's a lot of podcasts out there, right? So how do we differentiate that we're a radio show? And at the time, and still to I believe, we were the first ever all cannabis-based talk shows allowed on FCC airwaves without being, fined or we were allowed. We were exempt. We were.
You got the permission.
Right.
give you
So, but it was
permission.
a struggle. A lot of people don't realize the behind the scenes struggles between the radio station to keep the fact that we were educational. We were providing something that a child could watch. We were not mocking a plant. We weren't trying to be stoner-esque and be silly. So like some
I
of the
like
shows,
that word, stoner-esque.
right? Right. But here we are.
That's the best word ever.
Fancy. That's
Right.
a fancy word.
So once we get the station behind us, so like the other thing
Mhm.
that helped us is we launched behind Democracy Now. So Democracy Now, we had literally 80,000 people listening to that show, and we came in right behind them. So it was like, all right, now we have to create a content that's going to keep 80, how do I keep these people here? So I brought in nurses from Jessalyn
Vermont.
Dolan, which you guys know, right? So she came on from Vermont
Yep.
Cannabis Nurse Association, right? And also a part of the American Cannabis Nurse Association as well.
Oh, yeah.
She was a great benefit to the show. So for me, it was all about literally putting a stamp on everything somebody could mock my show about. So I was like, all right, I have a cannabis expert. We brought in Brandon Barbario. He was on the show for quite a while, and he was on all the OLCC certifications. He had the experience. He was my cannabis expert backup, right? We had Jessalyn Dolan on, who is so now here's our medical nurse that has, she's an RN, she's a doula, she's an amazing woman, and she's a very knowledgeable woman who has a very proud stance. So she came on and did segments with us and brought in our health tips of the week. Then we brought in our lawyer, Tim Fair, who's still on the show, and that brought in the law aspect of the show. So now we could have everything from health to laws to us growing, and we were bringing in, I worked really hard to go out and bring in people. Now our show numbers exploded, so we were hitting 1 million listeners roughly a show between streaming and all these things. We can get reports off of IRC radio, so which was also a weird thing for us because now we're hitting these people. We're global. The show is taking off. We've talked about before. It's like the weird stigma that still surrounds people in cannabis that won't like our shows because they're going to get in trouble with their work, right? I actually just talked to somebody today about that. It was really interesting. Like, I love the show, but I can't. And it's like, we hit, 50,000 people and we only have 2,500 likes. We hit 1 million listeners and nobody supports us on our thing, even though they're streaming our show from a radio station, right?
So they're spying. That's what I look at it. They're spying.
Right. So we have to say hi to everybody out there, right? That are afraid to say hi or afraid to chat or anything that you would normally, to support you like to see if you're on an endeavor like this, right? We ended up knowing who we were. So when we go to mass, people are like, you're that guy. And I'm like, I'm the In the Weeds guy. And it was fun. So I spread the base wide. You know what I mean? It wasn't really, I hate to say it because a lot of people got mad at us because we weren't really focused on Vermont. I was like, well, we have access to this huge thing, then we have to build a show that's going to provide people from New York to like it, and people from here to like it, and people from there to like it. Then we got into
You're evolving.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the demographic is not huge in Vermont for a radio station, but like, it's a powerful station. We're on 2 channels, but it was just streaming. It was the people that follow that network specifically because of what it's been known for as an educational based concept, college based show forever. Like, Fish came out of here. A lot of huge campus supporters came out of this. Goddard College is where the station was based at. So if anybody knows Goddard College, we give Goddard a huge plug. We love those guys. But a great station. They had one of the nicest. I can't even explain how great this place was, but literally I was there for, like I said, about 10 years prior to the show launching, doing a DJ show every Friday night with all my friends. And was just like, man, this is what we're missing. This is the educational link for me to get like you guys to my mom. You know what I mean? So for me, my goal is to bring on well-rounded, respectable people, and then also inspire people. So like, Mark, we were talking recently, and like your inspirations that made you sit in the chair that you're at now because you've had a different journey and you weren't a nurse to begin with. And it was like me, I was a stoner in the music industry that started utilizing my connections within music to bring a cannabis-based show on to educate people like you, to inspire basically somebody like you. So my hope of my show was to have you, Marco, watch a show and be like, holy fuck, like, I feel it. I get the vibe. And like, so, and also at the time, every show I watched was like a typical talk show. It was like, hey, and I think you guys have probably seen this too in our industry. It's like, hey, where's my list of questions? It's like a question and answer, Q&A, a yes or no, right? Exactly. But like, so, typically in our media industry.
Can I tell you the reason why we have this, Joe?
Well, no, for you guys,
Jerry
that's
always
great.
makes great notes, Joseph.
But this is organic. This is what I love about Zoom now. This is what I love about where I am with media. Like, it's become
exactly.
Yeah.
This is because I don't want to forget something. Because if there's something that strikes me really important, I don't want to forget to ask. Because as you know, my hippocampus can, this part of my brain can kind of like wander off, and I can get so enmeshed in what you're saying. I'm like, wait a minute, I wanted to ask him that.
Yeah. Oh man, obviously we do the same thing with our show. I tend to consume a lot of cannabis. I've had some great cannabis I just got from a friend recently, so a huge shout out to Kevin. So as you guys know, I'm pretty passionate about the show, so it was something that I felt like I had to do. It was like somebody came to me one day and was like, dude, just need to create this show. Then I started generalizing concepts, and then my buddy Rick Reddington and the Love were sitting on his tour bus one night, and I was giving him this idea, and he's like, dude. And at this point, I'm like managing like 2 bands. I'm putting together festivals, and like here I am doing a radio show, and like here I'm like talking to my buddy who I work with in the music industry about this other project I want to build. And he's like, dude, you're always in the weeds. And then we both looked at each other, and like I said, I'll give a shout out to Rick. It became the name. Like it suited my life. It suited everything I do. But like the health and consciousness of what the cannabis could be was the main goal. You know what I mean? It was like, we can all get stoned. There's stoner radio. And then like every show I would watch, and actually Timothy Fair, who was part of the show, was one of my main inspirations. So a couple main inspirations I had were Joe Rogan. I just love the way he does interviews and how he just sits there and talks, and people they engage in a way that they would never engage with somebody in an interview before. You know what I mean? It was just a really comfortable, unique, and like for me, it's about stories, it's about inspiration. So for me, I want somebody to realize that it can be nurse Mark, like that nurse that's on the fence that says, do I join? Do I cross that line? Do I make it known? How do I do that? How do I feel comfortable doing that? And know that they're going to be welcome doing it, right? Like anything that people are going to do, all those stigmas that people want to do, like that farm that's on the hill that's producing corn right now, that's really considering doing a hemp crop. Let's inspire them. You know what I mean? Let's show them the people that do it every day. And the only way I know how to inspire somebody is to let them meet and see and shake someone's hand or hear them tell their story, right? Like we're talking about.
Storytelling is so important. So important. It's how people sharing their compelling stories of healing, people that you would never ever think that would use cannabis. When they come out of the closet and share their story of how it's completely 100% transformed their lives. You have to take a look at that. You know,
and our show is based to also talk to the people that were against cannabis. Like I wanted to open those doorways and allow that police chief to come on the radio and explain to me in his understanding why he's either against cannabis, why he thinks the arrests should be the way they are, or get like a real general appeal. Because at that point in time, I was talking to a lot of police people that were either didn't care, they were on the fence. Some guys were really kind of like pro, like, oh, this is the way we're taught. And I get it. You know what I mean? Like we talked about the healthcare industry. Like when you're trained, you took a whole industry for 60, 80 years and trained them to hate something and not include something, and that this is bad, whether it's a medical industry, like we talk about the endocannabinoid systems, right? When my mom went to her medical training, right? Cannabis was a bad thing, right? So, like again, the Ronald Reagan
still being taught as a bad thing, Joseph.
Which kills me,
less
right?
and less, but it's still out there.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the stigmas I worry about for especially people like you. I talked to Jesselyn about this because she was like one of those people in Vermont that's advocating for the Vermont Cannabis Nurse Association, which is part of the American Cannabis Nurse Association, right? And like I want to support her. I love supporting women in this industry because I think it's a great thing that this industry is so loving and open to women and people of all generations and colors and backgrounds, right? So for me, I came out of the culinary industry. So if anybody knows about like the legit culinary industry, like every race, color, gender, love, affair, life thing, we all communicate in the kitchen, we make it work, and we learn to adapt and how to work with everybody. So for me, I didn't understand like, the racial divides in the countries and like the things that we've had issues with lately. Like to be where we are in 2020, and with the knowledge that we have, and to see where we are with technology, to still have that be a hindrance in our society really kind of sucks. I didn't see that in our industry, so I was like, this is great, I love it, let's go forward with it. I grew up outside of Boston, so I had friends with everybody. I was the minority really when I worked there, right? I was running a restaurant where I was the only white guy, right? So that you learn to appreciate and love and respect everybody's background. So for me, like, everybody's an asshole. Like, there's assholes in every culture. That's what I tell everybody. Sorry to swear to anybody who's listening, but
they're just human, you know.
They're just human.
Part of being human.
So and like, everyone, they're human. Everyone's got an asshole, and some people show there's more than others.
Exactly, and we all have a bad day, which I generally respect. And it's like, you know, life isn't easy, so we all have a bad day. We all go through a bad week. We have heartbreaks and things that really bring us up, and that's where friends and people become important, right? So it's like the understanding, but it's like you guys say, it's like we wake up every day. I just had this conversation with a friend. We wake up every day to create what we want out of today. So like you guys, we talk about the positive energy feeling, right? The fact that, you know, let's, you know, I'm on opioids. It's self-reflection. Like, let's look at, like, you know, this is what I want to do in my show, is that guy that's on opioids for a medical reason that he doesn't need to watch the show and be like, I can go to the doctor and get prescribed cannabis. Like, that's the inspirations I want. You know what I mean? I can go, you know, fix this issue I have with my skin. Like, is something as simple as that, right? Or to at least back everybody else, because, you know, the biggest thing, and I still think we get it. It's like hippie medicine. You know, I'm sure you still talk to doctors that laugh at the idea that cannabis can be a benefit because we've used it as a stoner item for so long.
Right.
And this is where we've talked before about the medical and rec crossing. Like, you know, the vape carts.
It's all about intention. You know what I mean? Like, once the medicine hits your body and you consume it, it interacts with you in a medical way. But how it's going to affect you depends upon how you intend to use it. Do you intend to use it for the right reason? It's either medical, recreational, or irresponsible. That's how I look at it.
Those are your three choices.
But that can be used across all levels of everything we do in our lives, right? Whether it's like you said, I love how you always bring back the water subject, because we're always like, drink water, but water can kill us. Like, let's talk about that, right? Anything in excess is going to hurt, right? So, and which is the interesting conversation, because now we're talking about psychedelics being openly available and legalized in most states, and a lot of people are having a hard time understanding that concept, right? Here in Vermont, we have like safe houses for heroin addicts, right? Which is a mind-boggling thought. It's kind of crazy to think about, but it provides, you know, an open, safe place for people to come get tested.
Hell of a lot better than putting them in jail, Joseph.
Yes, you know, I don't.
Hell of a better option.
I agree. So, like, I'm one of those weird people, and I'll be honest with you, I have pros and cons about it, but I truly appreciate.
Let's hear them. I want to hear your pros and cons.
You know, so, you know, I've struggled for many years with one of my best friends that was an addict in many different things, right? So we put him into rehab. I've struggled to see a kid go from the awesomest kid in the world to the lowest kid in the world, right? And as a best friend, you know, it cost me a lot of money. It cost me a lot of emotions, you know what I mean? And you never want to see anybody go through that, right? Especially people who care about it. And it got to the point where back in, you know, he was doing good. He got back into Vermont. He's in a Suboxone program, right? And here I am, the weed guy. We're doing the show. I'm promoting things. At this point, I was making a medically minded product. I was actually making strain-specific based gummies for medical patients. So I was the guy that you could actually get. That gummy was strain-specific, terp-specific. Everything was specific, made from oils that were derived from plants, right? And we could do it through gummies because we use an oil base, right? And they work great. They were really strong. They work great. The biggest thing I saw in the market was, especially in the edible field, was, all right, so I want to go out and watch a show tonight, right? I'm going to go buy a package of candy or gummies. I consume them, and they were major indica, and now I'm on the couch drooling on myself. So I was meeting too many people that were sharing these experiences with me, especially from the medical patient standpoint, because typically the medical patient standpoint needs something to get up and go, needs something to create energy, needs something to take that pain away so they can stand up and do dishes or go to work or focus on their task at hand, especially with people with anxiety and a crazy mind. For me, I can get ADHD. So my mind starts going 100 miles an hour faster than I can process. Then I start doing circles, and then I'm like, oh my God. And then I'll smoke some weed, and it's like, boom, stop. All right. Then my tasks start flowing, and I usually get it done, and I kill it. I can focus, right? So for me at work, I was that guy that, like, when I wasn't stoned, if we talk about this, people would be like, are you okay? Like, do you feel okay today? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not high. So you only know me when I'm high, kind of thing, right? Because I worked in restaurants. So, like, you're always going high, you get focused, you chopping vegetables for 4 hours, right? It was an interesting upbringing for me. So I always had cannabis near me. But the biggest thing was the education for the show. It was like, for what you guys are doing. It was like to take the stigma away from somebody like me who's been consuming my whole life, that somebody would look at and be like, this guy is just a weed addict. So I play the idiot savant on the show. And my partners were the same way. So it's like, we really wanted to create what we have now, right? We try to be the beginning of that in what we call media. So when I watched the Tim Fair interview, it was, well, how do you feel about cannabis? Should it be legal? And then he'd be like, yes. And then it'd be like, oh, so do you think about this? And he'd be like, no. And it'd be like, what do you think about this? Yes. And what do you think about this? No. And it was just like, these were all the cannabis shows I was listening to and all the information I could find. And for me, with my ADHD and my, hey, let's prove a point, like, what's the background of all this? Where's the information? Like, I want to hear why he said this or why she asked that, or understand what they're talking about, because it's like, does pot have a medical benefit? Yes. What the hell did that mean 3 years ago, right? To somebody who's, like us, you know what I mean? That's not very inspiring to anybody, you know what I mean?
Right.
For us to sit down and be able to pick a topic nowadays and do a show every day and not go to jail over it, like you guys, we can pick a topic. What do you want to talk about today? You want to talk about diabetes?
Exactly.
We can talk about for
next
5
week.
hours.
Next week, right. I got that show all ready for you.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, though. So now we've opened up these avenues, right? And in radio, being the first one there, it was really kind of created a different way we approach it. Because on that station, you have to be non-biased. There's no commercialization, right? There's a different approach that you're required to take when you're on radio. Right now, I can smoke weed and we can just do whatever we want. We can, the show's however we want to be. On radio, you have calls, you have FCC guidelines you have to follow. I can't do Magola. I can't promote shows. I can't promote sales. I can't promote money. I can't sell anything like that. So I can have you come on, though, and promote your idea and your everything that you want to talk about. And as long as I stay biased with my questions and my approach to you, legitimately, we're FCC okay.
So you can ask me, so you can feed me the right questions to ask, so I can answer them.
So that's my trick, right? So everybody's like, you're so good at asking questions to get these points on. I'm like, legitimately, I had to do that so I could get my whole point across in radio world. You know what I mean? Because I did have a preconceived concept of what I wanted to talk about, but for me, it was like, when you come on my show, like I told you, it was just really simple, easy. We just want to know who you are, where you're from, and literally what is that story that gets you into cannabis, right? Because I think everybody that we've talked to are at a level that people respect. Like, I respect the hell out of you guys. You guys have a great following. People believe in what we're doing, right? And like we were talking about, as much as there's a struggle for what we do, and people don't realize the behind the scenes struggles and acceptance and things that we do, we always get that phone call from somebody that, like, just we made a huge change in their life, right? There's many times I wanted to hang the show up because it's not a profit maker. I don't make money off of it. And like, for me personally, with my integrity and everything I've put into this show, like, I can't turn it into that. For me, with this show, like, can we take it something else and go somewhere else with what this show has done? Yes. But like, it's for an educational basis, for what we do, for everything we're about. Because once I do that, I've worked for corporations recently where people were like, you just sold out. I'm like, how do I go and work in my industry without selling out and making somebody feel like our non-biased show that brings us all together to educate our elders or our children? And the children exposure is just as much as important to me as our elders or our seniors or our sick people, because that stigma for the child has to be erased the most. For me, like, I have an 8-year-old son. We all have children, right? So that stigma to that child is more important to me than my grandmother right now, because he's my next generation, right? So I think part of our problem with addictions and where we all start, like, I mean, I'll tell you my story where I started smoking weed. I was at a friend's house drinking beer, getting drunk, and somebody handed me something. That's literally where probably everything I've ever tried happened, right? So for me, when people talk about, like Dr. Uma, we talk about, weed's the entrance drug into all these other addictions. I sit there and laugh
No
because
alcohol.
from my personal experience, and you guys have shared me with yours, which again, interject with yours again. When I smoke weed, I don't think I need to go do a line of something or inject myself with something. It's just a different high. It's a high that I appreciate very much differently, right? I'm not going to say I'd never tried or indulged in any other drugs or narcotics in my lifetime to say I've tried them and give them a shot, but like nothing to the point of like opioid use, because I've seen the hurt and I've seen the pain. I've buried my friends. Why the fuck would I go do that? But I've had one of the hardest realities with the opioid crisis versus cannabis right now was I was talking to a high school kid that was using heroin. And I looked at him and somebody I know, I'm like, dude, I'd give you weed if you just come talk to me, right? He's like, yeah, but like weed for me is $50 a bag and a hit of heroin's $5. So that really fucking struck me. So that's another reason why I've sought out to bring cannabis education, because I want that child to know that that option is not a healthy option. There is cannabis that we can find for less than $50. So if somebody ever feels that way, call me. Because there's people that will help. You know what I mean? There's
totally.
groups of people that will donate cannabis to help your child or help your sister, your brother, your mother, or your father get off these addictions, right? Yeah, I know Jesselyn will find people. We'll find people. There's people that support with FECO and cancers and stuff like that. We want to help, right?
Caregivers.
Yes, exactly. And me personally, like I was saying through my friend who was struggling with addictions forever, he came back and started smoking weed with me, and he changed and he became himself again, and he started breathing again, you know what I mean? And it was like he stopped just his like with me, his brain stopped spinning, right? But now he's in a Suboxone program in Vermont where if he does cannabis, he gets kicked out of the program, right? Let's talk about our medical care system now, right? This is where we need the overhauls, right? This is where what you guys do.
We're just not there yet, man.
Yeah,
That's why we're all in. That's why we do what we do.
Exactly. And how it's going to get into the system, I say this over and over and over again. It's going to happen in the community first. It needs to reach a critical mass in the community where people are asking for it, and that's how it's going to get into the traditional system. We've seen it this summer working, certifying doctors. How did you hear about us? You take care of one of our patients. You know what I mean? So,
but the doctors, but you guys need the support too from our industry, which is where what you guys don't quite have either, right? Like for me, we talked about like the programs, like what's the program that we have established that everybody agrees on to move forward with to educate our doctors? I know you guys are working on all these great things, but like in the last 3 years, there's been no programs, right? So for you as a nurse or a doctor or in the medical field, we have to go out and literally educate yourself on this, right?
Well, nurses are starting to really start to expand because the National Council State Boards of Nursing, which is the overall group.
It's a national accreditation group.
And they create all the exams for the nurses to take in order to pass and become a nurse. So they came up with a call to action, which was very interesting, was when I started my podcast in July of 2018. National Council State Boards of Nursing wrote in the Journal of Nursing Regulations that all nurses, active nurses, nursing students, and advanced practice nurses must have 6 essential areas of clinical knowledge when it comes to cannabinoid therapeutics. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really powerful. This is like, and so we are actually looking as nurses to have it be put on the nursing exam. Right. Why wouldn't it be? It's the most important system for our body.
Right. Well, there you go. There's something written in a rule 2 years ago that still right now most doctors don't want to hear. They're still refusing to appreciate or look into, or like we talked about it last week in the show where we had a couple of articles referring to all doctors being able to and being able to prescribe cannabis, right? Which I think is a great idea, but that also requires that doctor to have an understanding of that cannabis, right? How do we make it easier for these doctors? Where is that program? You know what I mean? That was the thing that we were working on. Right?
But it's different. It's a different way it's a different medicine. It's a different way to work with the patient. It's a different way than pharmaceuticals. So it's going to be tough for them to get on board, right?
Oh, dude, I'm excited for it. That's why I love what you guys are doing. But for me, like now, I'm the guy that goes and my crazy brain and my fundamental brain, where we have to be like, you guys. Here I go. Here's a great program. Here's the ideas that we need to have. Here's the education for the nurses right now. How do we back you guys up? Like, how does the government say this is what the accreditation that we're going to accept? How does the nurse that says, how do we convince that nurse to step over that line and say, I'm going to not only fight for this, but stand up to those stigmas? Because I think we've all experienced it, especially if you're inside of a clinic or a hospital where, I've talked to Jesselyn about this a few times, and shout out to Jesselyn again about the stigmas that she actually endured up at, the facilities that she was working at. We won't name names or anything like that, but, out of respect, because they're very highly respectful facilities with very highly respectful doctors and world renowned. And she faced these stigmas. She, even with us when she started the show, was very quiet about who she was because she did not want that stigma to come back on her. And I think there's been a lot of doctors and professionals, and even any professional that feels this way, law professional, especially with doctors, because you guys need that backing, and you need that kind of like, all these accreditations to say weed's okay, so you guys can do what you do and start teaching it in the proper way and have that fundamental come down to you. So for me, like, I worked on a project last year that was literally like, I told Sherry, it was basically the program. It was the poster on the wall where you walk in and you're like, oh, I got a headache, or I have this pain, or I have this cancer, or I have this menstrual cramps, or all these things are great for this. I have sexual issues, and then I need endurance, or I need endurance. I'll laugh, but these are great things that cannabis can actually be beneficial for, right?
No, absolutely. You've got cannabinoid receptors on all 11 organ systems, your immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that tell your body to do something.
Interconnected.
It's all that the umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
On the umbrella right there.
But we've talked about, and you guys even have agreed and said, even with like distillates and like edibles, like you don't know what you're getting into it because people are using blended concentrates, right, or distillates, right? So they're blending all sorts of things. They're making a distillate. They're sucking out all the terps, and then they're taking the terps and they're giving you back the terps in a terpene bottle, so you can actually just put it back in a little bit here, mix it all back together, put it in a cart, and give it to a patient, right? That's where I get frustrated with the industry. I love carts. I'll use them. I mean, I've kind of got away from them now, but like when I look at a patient smoking a cart, I'm like, man, like that's all wrong. But like if you could walk into a doctor's office, you know what I mean, and Mark can sit down and go, hey guys, the easiest way to reach out to a patient is sometimes visual stuff, right? So he turns around and goes, what's your problem? Here's the 3 options we have to start with. Here's why. Like you guys were talking about terpenes and strains last week with the leaf lead top, of 2020, right? We were doing the strain of the week every week, and everybody thought that was our farce and our funny part of the show, but it was like, no, this is to really educate patients to understand. Like, when we talked about Granddaddy Perp, or we talk about Sour Diesel, or we talk about Landrace strains that are really beneficial to your health, we're giving you the health benefit, the terp profiles, the flavors, the taste. There's not many side effects except for like, sleepiness, dry mouth, like this is
the other thing too. Here's a cool thing, Joe. When people talk about side effects, this is what I always say about side effects. A side effect of one patient is the effect that another patient might be looking for. For example, that dry mouth, that's what the ALS patient wants to have. They want to have the dry mouth because they're salivating all the time. They're drooling. Right. The red eyes shows, that red eyes is your vessels in your eyes are vasodilating. Right, they're getting bigger, so that's opening up to decrease pressure. That's what the glaucoma patient wants. They want to have red eyes, right?
Well, that's my whole point with the knowledge of strains, because as well, like people with ADHD, myself, like things respond differently to me than they would somebody else. So that's why understanding what these strains are to begin with, and like you guys brought up a great point, even with your show that we covered last week, was the hybridization of almost every strain we have now. You know what I mean? Like so that Gorilla Glue, and then and this even goes from a growing standpoint. Like so, if you're a grower, right, and you get 15 seeds of Gorilla Glue, right, there is literally zero chance you're going to get 15 of the same plant out of those seeds.
It's not
right?
going to be identical. You're right.
No.
Absolutely.
It's just like every tomato that you plant, or every tomato. It's not the
Exactly.
same.
And another interesting thing about cannabis. So here's that one thing. So when people talk about like pheno hunting, right? So they're literally taking those 15 plants now, knowing they're going to be all different. There might be 2 or 3 that are going to be the same, and they're going to grow them out to see what quality that plant has, right? What side of things that plant falls under, right? And then now, what I love about the industry is we're kind of going back to the landrace single strain approach to things, where for the last 10 or 15 years we got really into hybridization of everything. Like we took a beautiful Girl Scout cookie, we crossed it with everything on the planet because it was a beautiful tasting thing and it worked great. From a grower standpoint, Girl Scout cookie sucks to grow. It doesn't bulk. It's all small nugs. It's not a sellable item, but the flavor was amazing, right? So black market wise, this is why I laugh about the industry, because it drives the industry, right? You cross it, you have beautiful strains, and now you have market. So now what's everybody trying to do? They're trying to back cross to an original land race, because now we're thinking medical, because that one strain could benefit you in so many different ways. So now if you had a chart that says this and this, this is why people do the strains of the week. This is why Leafly puts that out. It's not because they're like, oh, you want to get knuckle fucked to the forehead with Alaskan thunder fucked, and this is the strain you want. It's typically like, they're talking about the euphorias, they're talking about the health benefits, they're talking about the effects, so if, a digestive issue, a pain, getting lost in things, because, like we talked about, how many different cannabinoids, how many different strains, the potential of this as a medicine is beyond any other plant benefit, because no other plant gives us as many options, right?
No.
Right.
But this is where it benefits our health side. So how do we get that strain specific into a product, into a doctor's hand, so like you guys can turn around and literally pick one of 40 options off the shelf and hand it to your patient? Now this is where we develop the relationship with our patient. They become confident in you. Now this is the other thing I hate to say, because again, like any other pharmaceutical, we have the issue that it might not work, right? When we utilize our doctor in a pharmaceutical, we don't like it, doesn't work, we go back to our doctor and say we don't like it, doesn't work. He either gives you another 3 pills to do whatever because of side effects, or he changes your prescription, right? But a lot of times I've seen with cannabis or CBD, and I'm sure you guys have heard this too, is like they tried it didn't work, or they went it didn't work, or they had anxiety, or they had
doing it on your own. That's right.
But this is the thing too, is one of the stories that I always share with my patients is this. It took me 2 years to figure out how to make cannabis work for me, so I could control my experience, truly. And it was much more than just cannabis. It was everything else that I was doing or not doing in my life, right? What am I eating? What am I drinking? How am I exercising? So in other words, it's teaching a patient to use it medically or recreationally is pretty much the same thing. Because what you're doing is you're teaching them about their body and how it interacts, and how every single thing that they do, every single activity, is going to affect that experience. So that's why we do what we do as nurses. So we want people to have safe experiences for whatever reason that they want to use.
And effective experiences.
Yes,
your point,
exactly.
Joe,
It's expensive.
550 varieties of cannabis, right? All with different chemobars. That's a long time to figure out which one's going to work for you.
And that's
with hybridizations and things like that, you don't know how that strain, like you said, we'll use Gorilla Glue for example. Even if you cross this Gorilla Glue with a sativa heavy or an indica heavy or whatever, like it's hard to know or understand what that experience you're going to get, because again, it's been modified, right? A lot of the as a grower, you understand when you harvest a plant, you go by trichomes, right? So there's an influence that you can actually even put on a plant to make it yield either way as well. So like if you clip it down early, it's going to be
cultivation. Time.
And I hate saying sativa leaning, because as you guys brought up even in the episode last week, which we covered and I loved, because you hit the nail on the head, like that's not really, that doesn't work. The sativa hybrid indica doesn't work because of, again, the hybridization, again, the phenos, again,
it's a reference point. That's kind of how I look at it. It's a reference point.
So is it more an upper? Is it a couch locker? Is it a focuser? I love weed that gets me up and going and focused. But this is again where we fell back to the products, like I was talking to you before about the strain specific. Because you go and you buy a bag of gummies and you're going to watch your favorite band, and all you can do is yawn and be tired because that thing just knocked you out, right?
Yep.
Or you need to go to bed and you get one that's just straight juice and gas and makes you go do your dishes and vacuums your house for 3 hours trying to sleep, right?
Oh,
Fire. That's what I call fire.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
these were the feedback that I was getting as a provider in the green industry, right? And trying to work with patients because our dispensaries literally sucked around here, right? Zero options. So I was talking to a lot of people and patients, and being that I was the weed guy, now we have our show, and now I've been in this industry. I was working with a lot more patients than I was like just stoners, right? Working with patients with Lyme, working with patients that couldn't walk, working with patients with cancer. And I've seen the benefits. I've seen people work with the children with cancer, and that was my influence. Like I said, with the show is the children with cancer. Man, I heard a story about a girl in Texas who was taken away from her parents. They were arrested for giving her CBD. This was 20 years ago. There's a big uproar. The child was seizing. They didn't know what to do. They gave her back to the parents. They put her back under CBD. She stopped seizing. And she's alive this day because of cannabis, right? So these are stories that we love to talk about.
Yes.
And that really, like I said, like you were saying, you were talking about your nurse last week and your mom finally the lights off.
My mom.
Those are my lights. Yeah, those are my lights. I had a child, and then everything that for the first 2 years of my child being a dad for the first time, like. I was that guy on TV that every little sad little child commercial come on, I'd be crying, you know what I mean? Or emotional about my child and how do I bring him up right and how I bring him up in a world that is safe and secure and he's not afraid of anything. More importantly, handle. Like we say, we talk about mental consciousness and stability. It's handling situations where I think in generations we're losing that because of our parents or the atmospheres were brought up in as a matter.
I call it the traumas and the dramas.
Right. But the problem is a lot of people don't want to admit it, right? But we're reflective of our own trauma. So we have a decision to wake up and, like we said, we can live in our trauma and let those cycles repeat themselves, or we can understand that we have a trauma and we know it's not easy and process it and take those steps of positivity to get yourself into. And it's like with depression. I experienced depression for the first time a few years ago, right? I was never a depressed person. I was always a positive go. I'd laugh through anything. I was very good at handling stress, and I hit the wall, right? And for years, I had friends that went through depression, struggled with it. For me, being the happy-go-lucky guy, it was very hard for me to be the guy for them to talk to, but I was always the happy-go-lucky guy. So I was the asshole that told them all the wrong things, you know what I mean? And you realize years later, you're like, wow, everything I tried to do on a positive note was not the right thing for somebody in that situation, right? It was like all those things that people just didn't need to hear at that point in time. It's like the typical response to everybody in a situation. So it's like, how do I listen? How do I help people, right? Sit down and smoke a joint. Sit down and smoke a blunt. Let somebody talk to you, right? Listen to somebody. Slow everything down, right? I don't know.
Emotional processing, really, truly. It's feeling, dealing, and healing. Feel, deal, heal,
But we see that a lot. We see a lot in our society where everything's really reflective and combative, right? So if you have an issue with me and no matter how you approach it to me, you can do it combative, you can do it properly, you can do it professionally. My trauma is going to be it's going to be my reflection, my response to you, right? Like I could be an asshole and say rude things and be all pissed off and I thought you're my friend, or I can be like, or I can appreciate where you're coming from, or on a professional level, I'm going to eat my pride. Like, so these are my three choices now, right? And like, where does your integrity lie on that scale, right? And this is where I think people get away from. This is why what we're trying to do is we're bringing in an industry together where people are trying to chisel their own spot by undercutting and being mean and pushing this negativity, and it's like and getting into that drama. So like you said, we can wake up and process and live in drama, or we can get out of it and process and live healthy, promote, support other people's healthy lifestyles. And it's like what they say, if you want to be around success, go be around successful people, right? You want to be around drug addicts,
Happy.
go be around drug addicts, right? Like you're going to be easily fall into that rut, and no one's going to push you in or out or anywhere. You'll just be accepted, right? So for me, it's all about mindset. But I've seen people struggle with opioids, and it's sad that we can't get cannabis to support that more. And in most states and cases, like that's actually something that gets them kicked out of these programs, which then in most cases violates them on a law issue that will put them in jail. So you're like,
Right.
and in Vermont, it's legal for a patient, right? But they can't go get a medical card. So it's like,
Right.
you know, we perpetuate these own issues with our own governments, right? That make it hard for us to help patients, and this is what we're doing. So, as this patient
Why we're here,
educated on cannabis, our state won't allow him to do it. We don't have a doctor that will prescribe it to him, and we don't have an insurance system to back our patients up so they can actually go get medicine, right? Because we just had to become an essential medicine, like. When I talk about being an essential component, essential product, it became an essential medicine.
Where it's headed, though.
It is totally
curbside pickup, right? Like again, we talked about this
delivery.
3 years ago, did you ever imagine you could pull up to a curb in Boston and pick up fucking weed from a dispensary legally, right? Pay a few bucks on taxes.
Yeah.
No, right?
No.
And the cop's going to wave to you when you do it. And as long as you put it in a lockbox, you can drive away, and they're not going to pull you over. And go home
yeah, it's important to put it in that lockbox, though.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Next to the bottle of Jim Beam.
Yeah, that's open right next to you, right? Again, this is that. Well, these conversations were what my show is really designed.
Yes.
It was
Joe, how many people would you say you've had on your show? And that's one question I definitely wanted to know. And number two, who has been like your most inspirational speakers, like inspired you personally?
All right. Let me talk with the inspiration. So again, I was saying, like, you know, Joe Rogan was one of my biggest inspirations with just the way he approached a conversation, right?
But what about on your show? Did Joe Rogan, like, what about your
No, not Joe
show?
Rogan. Actually, I had I was going to say my number one inspiration was Radical Russ Gainville, who did the Radical Russ show, who did when I found the one show that connected with me, it was called the Marijuana Agenda. It was on TuneIn Radio. This is where it all clicked to me because he had millions of subscribers, right? So I was like, people are listening to these shows, right? The numbers are there. So why am I not doing this? So he was the guy that would take all that propaganda news that would be like, oh, the sky's falling, the kids are getting all these car accidents, abuse is up, and this and this and this, that were propaganda towards cannabis, right? And he would take these articles and find the other 15 articles that combat that article, and he would present that in an hour-long podcast, right? And he was a great talker and really, you know, intellectual and in and out and up and down. And for me, somebody that kept me on the show for that long, right? He was my biggest inspiration in radio. We did have him on the show. He owns a dispensary now in Oregon, which was amazing. As far as how many people we've had on the show, you know, we've had multiple shows with, you know, half a dozen people where we do like the Pipe Classic reviews and get all the most famous glass blowers from all over the world, which was a huge experience for me, because we were really integrated with that whole event, which was like I said, the number one glass blowing competition in the world. It's a week-long event. These guys would come on air. We've had like the Token Dead come on air. We've had Hot Rock Super Joint, who's like a comedian and a big just cannabis personality rapper out, you know, and we've had Ed Rosenthal on the show. We had CryoCure people on the show. We had Dr. Wow. on the show. We've had you guys on the show. We've had book writers on the show. Everybody from Lizzie Pose to we just had Shanti on, who just came out with the hemp cookbook, which is amazing. So we really try to bring people in from all over the world. We've had guests on from Puerto Rico, the UK. Oh my God, there's so many different places. Canada, many times, you know what I mean? So we try to bring in different ideas and intellects from all over the world, and right down to local farms with cultivators and processors and just experiences. People who do trimming for a lifestyle, because for me, the industry is so big that I want people to, again, how do you become a trimmer? You know what I mean? How do you own a trimming company that comes to you and trims product for people? Like, what inspires you to become that? those
Right.
are the guys I want to talk to and hear their story, because typically it's that story we all want to hear. Like, hey, a family member got cancer, and I realized that this was a product, and I was in this industry, and I used my industry experience to cross over. Right.
Right.
Those are the stories I wanted to inspire, and then do it from your health style, a cultivator style.
I have a question. Because I want to get back to how awesome you're doing and what you're doing in the community. So what is the vision for In the Weeds? What is the vision? Because we've talked about that. This is the last question because we have to wrap it up. But what is the vision for In the Weeds?
To just keep on doing what's doing. I mean, hopefully to launch other platforms. I personally, through In the Weeds, we're working on a 24/7 network that will hopefully bring all of our podcast shows together on a platform that can be profitable for both the people that produce the shows, because it's not an industry that is making people money, and it should be. I mean, we all, as people in radio and in podcast worlds, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. There's a lot of expenses that go in there that we hope to at least get covered, or if we can make enough money to produce our shows, imagine how great our shows would be. You know what I mean?
Right.
We didn't have to go do the 18 other things to cover our bills to come do this, because we are driven and we feel like we are that key to educate people, right? And then we're also working on a cannabis-based Canazon, which hopefully we'll see here in a few weeks, which brings together, again, it's bringing together the community to a platform. So you as a consumer can find everything you need on one website instead of having to go here and go there and be like, It'll be literally all those companies will just bring their products, or our platform will be a retail outlet of that. So now they can get like NurseMark CBD oil. They can go get Addicted Animals. If you give a bear a bong book, they can go get a CBD eye wrap thing, whatever they want. You know what I mean?
Whatever they want. The one-stop shop.
Right.
Canazon with Joe Smith.
Right. So it really follows the same fundamental as that, but it's just trying to bring into a community that we can all just make. And then within that, we can build knowledge and links. And it's like, hey, the greeners and this and this and this. And then, like, again, I think it's a great way to promote something in the proper way. It can be handled the proper way, but from a media-based platform, it's hard for everybody to keep up with all of our shows. It's hard for everybody to find us all. So we can get one platform that projects everywhere. And the amount of subscribed cannabis listeners out there that are on all these platforms that we'd be utilizing is tremendous. So there's people out there. There's people that are looking. So and as far as marketing goes, where do you put your money right now? You know what I mean? Like, because there really isn't radio support. There is very little magazine support unless you're in a specific cannabis-based company where it's like, Sensi, right? We'll talk about Sensi. Like, so when you put your money in a Sensi, what's the demographic? How many people are reading? How many people are specific? How many articles are they printing? I mean, we're trying to educate and get exposure. We're trying to get you guys so everybody can know what the health benefit is, right? You know what I mean? How do we find you guys? How do we make it easy? Are we on
That's
Spotify?
what I was just going to ask you.
How do they find you?
How do our viewers find you?
Right.
How do our viewers find you, Joe?
So right now, because I'm so embedded in all my other fun projects I do, I kind of lack on our own. But we're on all the platforms. Facebook, we have In the Weeds, which is our news-based platform, which we share all the latest articles. We have our fun memes and fun platform that's open for everybody in our industry to promote events, other shows. We're not, we are networkers. We're open. We're caring. We're loving. So anybody, including you guys, anybody tuned in who has their own cannabis-based shows, events, anything that you're doing in our industry, please post it there. Bring it there. If you're growing, I want to see your plants. The only thing we don't want to see is illegal sales or propagated sales. We just want to see craft buds. We want to see people doing the right things. We want to provide education for growers who, hey, I have a problem. Our page has been great for that. And I salute everybody that's on it. So we've had a lot of fun there. Instagram, we're there. Twitter, we're there. Also, there's a couple of great platforms I want to plug to, as well as YouTube. We're there. So if anybody's listening, please subscribe. But there's the WeedTube now that a lot of people are utilizing, and the Masters of Cannabis, which I think is a great site that people don't think enough people have found yet. So mastercannabis.org, check that out, guys. And then you can tune in every Wednesday at 4:20. We do go live to our Facebook page. We do post all of our archives to YouTube. We are working on getting back on live radio, so our formats may change a little bit to structure the radio guidelines. But until COVID is something that is handled and is coming down numbers, I don't know when that will be. Yeah, we're all excited to get this process rolling again, and now we're kind of like, going under curfews and lockdowns again. So hopefully we can get through this winter, which I am concerned with because it's flu season. We have people that traditionally get ill. We see a lot of the common symptoms and signs. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be
smart, be safe, stay home, wear your mask, use your cannabis safely and effectively. Use your cannabinoids and all of those other tools.
Have it delivered.
Yeah.
I get up.
Enjoy the snow. Just avoid people. Go do something. Go take a drive. Like I think people.
Come on our radio show. Come tell us, share your story. There you go. Right.
We love stories. We love stories. But like you guys, thank you for everything you guys do. Because like I said, the mental side of everything. The mental side of everything that needs to be talked about is not talked about enough.
Right. And we're talking about that. Trust me.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The mental side, the appreciation of how you wake up and approach your day, the AFA, right?
AFA, because that's what you are.
You're AFA, brother.
Yeah, just start your day off with positivity. Again, it's like how every door you have a door to walk through every day. It just matters how you want to be perceived on the other side, right?
That's
right.
Absolutely.
Generally just go with how you treat people, how you look at business, how you want to be treated, and make sure you get treated right yourself,
Yep.
Absolutely. So, Joseph, we are so extremely grateful that we're going to be on your platform weekly, every Wednesday, in the weeds, Prohibition Talk Radio from 4:20 to 6:20 p.m. Nurse Mark and I are doing health and wellness tips with Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse, and we're really excited to be a part of that.
Yes,
so thank you so much for joining us today. Don't hang up yet.
Thank you.
And,
find the archives,
Mark,
YouTube. We'll be hopefully working on some projects and to help push your guys' exposure as well. So be on the lookout. I'm really excited for what the future holds.
Excellent. And so, Mark, what kind of a weekend are we all going to have?
An absolutely fucking amazing weekend. Yes.
And remember, everyone, truly what it's all about. It is about living
weekend.
Your best life.
Yeah.
2020 is almost over. Christmas is around the corner. I think we're all starting to breathe a sigh of relief.
Sigh of relief.
Right.
See you on the other side.